So that brings me to a book that I've been reading with an unlikable narrator. It's called The End of the Road by John Barth. It was written in 1955 when the author was in his mid-20s. And so maybe that gives some hint towards why this character might be unlikable, but I'll just say it. The book is like pretty misogynistic. It's about a college professor who he has an affair with another professor's wife, and then the professor, like there begins an agreement where he can still sleep with the guy's wife. It's difficult to do like a reading, I feel like 70 years later, of like the social aspects of it. But I mean, there's domestic abuse, and there's kind of like just a disregard for the wife in general, like how involved she even wants to be. And she's like outwardly stating how she doesn't like her husband or the main character. And so like on a surface level, like I'm almost done with it. And so I'm kind of wondering what's the point of even finishing it? Even though like the issues that have come about happened very early in the book. And I already kind of knew what it was about. I didn't know how it would be portrayed. Also not someone who's going to say you should never read this or you have to read this or blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I guess maybe what drew me to the book in the first place is what made me keep on reading it. Because John Barth, like I said, it was his second novel published, but I think he wrote it at the same time as his first novel. He was very young, and he went on to change his style very greatly to like more surrealism and more like experimental novels, whereas this is sort of, it's postmodernism. It's like realism, but the writing of it is kind of academic in its devices and its decisions. And I'm wondering, like, does that lens of postmodernism and the fact that you're supposed to look at it and read it with a certain interpretation, does that make you look at the aspects of unlikable characters or misogyny? Does that make you look at that with like a grain of salt? Or do you look at that as like, no, he probably was making mistakes as a writer that would be annoying or hurtful to readers? I probably wouldn't recommend this book for that reason. Because, it's weird too. It's like you recommend something or you read something and then people start to formulate opinions on you because you read it as well. I don't mean to sound like bothered by that or like it's a huge issue in my life, but I don't know. It's interesting because just because of like the nature of the writing, and I'm interested in postmodernism anyway, and I think he's doing interesting things with his storytelling. It keeps me coming back to it, but I'm also like ready to be done with it, and I'm hoping that there's some sort of redemption of this female character who's the wife, who has been caught into this agreement between these two men that she doesn't like. So yeah, maybe I could just talk about why I like the prose of it. So with postmodernism, if people don't know what that is, it's kind of a vague giant tarp over a lot of different books, but it's sort of something that came about when academics and critics started writing about literature. Postmodernism in writing came about when authors started to consider those critics more, and they started to think more about what would impress the academics or what would impress the critics, as opposed to writing more traditionally. And so an example of this, in this End of the Road book, even in the first few pages, it's pretty comical about he's supposed to go to a job interview to start teaching at the school that he eventually starts teaching at. And there's like 5 pages of it where he's trying to set up whether the interview should be Monday or Tuesday. So he schedules it on Tuesday. And then like the interview guy calls him and is like, well, which one works better? Because Monday works better for me. And then they go back and forth, and he's like, I don't care, either works. And so then the guy's like, all right, let's do Tuesday. And so then, or let's do Monday. And then the main character like drives all the way to his interview, and he gets there, and the guy's like, oh, we were supposed to be on Tuesday. Like, you're 24 hours early, you're supposed to be here on Tuesday for the interview. And for me, as a reader, like, most people would go through those pages and be like, what the hell is the point of this? But for me as a reader, and also someone who writes and thinks about the craft of it and the author just as much as the characters, for me it's like, it's teasing, and it's supposed to be absurd. It's supposed to be funny that that's even part of the book. It's supposed to be funny that he even put that in there at all. Like, what's the point of it? And it's like, I mean, it's realistic. Like, things in life do happen like that. I'm trying to think of some other examples. So, in the beginning of the book, we know that this main character has a doctor that's trying to help him with some sickness. And then we go through maybe 50, 100 pages. And then finally there's a flashback to how he met this doctor. And the doctor was a complete stranger with no medical license who basically diagnosed him with paralysis and tried to convince him that he is suffering from some paralysis, and then brings him to like his practice. The doctor brings this main character to his practice and starts basically manipulating him into like saying what to do and like insisting that he needs help. And that's kind of what sparks him taking the job at the university. But it's like another absurdity that wouldn't really happen in a like well-crafted narrative that is supposed to follow the notes of like a travel narrative or a journey or a drama. It's like untraditionally absurd in like the decision to have this be a part of the story. I'm gonna try and finish it before the next podcast because I only have like 60 pages left. But the 2 things I want to look at, I think, because I didn't plan any of this, I'm just rambling. I do want to look at so the wife who gets involved in the 2 professors, the main character and the other professor, her name is Rennie. I wanted to look at her character more because the men in the book are misogynistic and it's first person, and then the narration, the story of it has lots of misogyny. But I think it's also important before waving a finger to actually look at how she's written. And reflecting right now, I think she is a pretty, first of all, just a likable character. And not shallow at all. Like, there's huge sections of her dialogues of her talking with the narrator. And I think, honestly, the book does probably examine how she's trapped and how she's not shown respect, or how she herself is kind of passive and can't get out of that because of her situation, because of the time that she lives in. And then the other thing I want to look at is the correlation between the doctor and the main character, where the main character passively gets involved in this doctor's treatment, and then he passively gets involved in this open relationship with a married couple. But I didn't really prepare anything, so have to do that next time. One book I finished was The End of the Road by John Barth. And I kind of had a cliffhanger on the last podcast where I was like talking about misogyny in the book, and like talking about whether there was a difference between writing that's misogynistic and characters and plot points that are depicting misogyny, if that makes sense. So I finished that book, and I'm just gonna double down and say I don't think I would really recommend it to people. It's like it's a major tragedy at the end of the book. Something awful happens, and then there's like not really any redemption. The character just leaves. So I don't know. Maybe I'll keep reading John Barth and try and find another book that would be better to recommend. Except it's funny because at the used bookstore here in downtown Davenport, the only one I found was actually the book that's usually paired with The End of the Road. It's called The Floating Opera. And then I went to another bookstore, and then they had The Floating Opera there. So that's the only other book I've seen, and it's technically traditionally paired with The End of the Road. So I don't know. Maybe it's just a sign I'm supposed to read it.